Hey everybody, welcome to Life is Beautiful. I'm Anthony. Today I want to talk to you about something that really tickles my fancy. Why isn't there a Trappist brewery in Germany? Germany's surrounded by Trappist breweries. There's a couple in the Netherlands, there's a bunch in Belgium, there's one down in Austria, one in Italy even. France was the origin point, the starting place of all Trappist breweries, so I technically count that. I started doing some research trying to figure out the answer to this question. Why are there no Trappist breweries in Germany? And I came across something. I discovered there actually is, kind of, a Trappist monastery with a brewery in Germany producing their own beer. And today I want to talk to you about Mariawald Abbey, Germany's lost Trappist brewery. Mariawald is a beautiful abbey located in the North Rhine region of Germany, an hour or so outside of Cologne. Mariawald's history dates back to the 1470s when a craftsman placed a paella into a hollowed-out tree along the roads to the small village of Heimbach. This sacred location would become a frequent place of worship for pilgrims traveling across Germany and soon became popular enough to warrant the construction of a wooden hut suitable for prayer and temporary refuge. In 1480, the destination had become so popular with travelers and pilgrims that it was donated to the Cistercian order of monks who had the personnel and the financial capability to provide maintenance and upkeep as well as servicing the tourists. The Cistercian Brotherhood quickly constructed housing areas, libraries, kitchens, and of course a chapel for prayers. And in 1486, the monastery was established atop of a hill, deep into the woods, and was named Nemus Maria, or the Forest of Mary in English, or Mariawald in German. So, like all monasteries back in this time, they, of course, the monks, the brothers, they brewed their own beer to keep themselves alive and sustained. I was unfortunately unable to find the records and the type of beers and what they brewed at this point in time because, as you'll come to learn, Mariawald had a bit of a troubled history. For nearly 300 years, Mariawald would continue to grow and service the people along their pilgrimages and the local inhabitants of the area. But it all kind of came to an abrupt stop in 1795 when Napoleon's forces, who were famously anti-clerical, went all across Europe. Once they got around the Cologne region, they absolutely ravaged Mariawald. They destroyed the abbey, they destroyed the temple, and they basically ripped out everything that was worth selling and sold it off. And of course, they kicked all the brothers out who had to flee looking for some type of safety and sanctuary elsewhere. It was then that Mariawald Abbey ended up staying dormant and abandoned for nearly a century more. It wasn't until 1860 when a wandering monk by the name of Ephraim van der Meulen came across the dilapidated abbey. Brother Ephraim was actually the abbot for the Olenberg Trappist monastery in the famed French brewing region of Alsace, and he was in need of expansion. He was looking for new locations that he would be able to push his brotherhood out. Ephraim ended up purchasing Mariawald, and he revived the monastery, and he brought it back into life, and he relocated a lot of the brothers from his abbey down in Alsace, brought them up here, got them to do the reconstruction and get it back in a living order. Once again, Mariawald was servicing the good people of the local area and acting as a sanctuary, a stopping point for pilgrims on their long journeys. Thanks to the efforts of Brother Ephraim, by 1861, Mariawald was back in operations, this time by the Trappist Brotherhood. And it's here where I really want to talk about what the beer brewing situation would have been like in Mariawald, but there's just no evidence. But going off of what we can kind of analyze from this situation and kind of make educated guesses on, I have to think that Mariawald would have been a center point for a fantastic and very interesting beer brewing epicenter. The Trappist Brotherhood, they took beer brewing more serious than any of the other Catholic monk brotherhoods, right? Out of all the orders. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they're so well known, so famous for their beer, is how serious and dedicated they took it. It was an act of service that they did, an act of worship for their God, to provide this beer to the good people of their locality. But it would have been strongly Belgian inspired. I mean, if you look across the entire Trappist brewing order, they all kind of stick to that Belgian beer style guideline. But these brothers from brother Ephraim, they came from Alsace-Lorraine, which is a very interesting part of France, which has gone back and forth in ownership between Germany and France for 1,000 years. There's a ton of German influence in Alsace, and it just would have been so interesting to see what exactly these brothers that now inhabited Mariawald were brewing, where their influence came from, where their inspirations came from, what their practices were, what beers they were releasing, because it would have also had to have been something recognizable and acceptable by the local people who were living around Mariawald, since these would have been the beers that they were being served. If I could go back in time, this would definitely be one of those locations where I would want to see, because it could have been this beautiful, harmonious fusion between what we would now recognize as Germanic and Belgian and French beer brewing practices, all under the Trappist banner, which would have made it even cooler. So, man, we really missed out losing those records. Things, again, would kind of carry on just business as usual for the Mariawald Trappist monks this time for, again, around 300 years. Only slight interruptions coming from the Prussian king's culture struggle. And besides that, they were mostly left unbothered, unperturbed, able to continue on their monkish ways, all the way up until World War I, where things just got rather chaotic. I mean, things were so severe, they were actual brothers from the monastery were drafted into service and had to go and fight wars, some of which died. But the Abbey became a field hospital. And then in World War II, several years later, it was largely damaged. And when the Nazis took power over Germany, they once again kicked them out. They forced them to leave and flee to more safe locations, since the Nazis also had a very strong anti-clerical position. But despite all of this, after World War II concluded, the Trappist brothers came back, rebuilt Mariawald, reestablished it, and wanted to get it back in working order. It took all the way up until the 1960s for Mariawald to be completely inhabitable and also be able to provide their goods, their services, their restaurant, and back to brewing. I mean, it took them a long time to get back on their feet. Fortunately for them, once again, they were left rather unbothered, except this time for much shorter. See, in 2018, the brothers of Mariawald were forced to leave, but this time by their own decision. See, in the Trappist order, they have kind of like a rule where every abbey, every monastery has to have at least 12 brothers, which would be able to provide all the necessary functions and services that a Trappist abbey, a monastery, is expected to provide. Because of low recruitment numbers and because of the lack of personnel dying off, things like that, they unfortunately did not have enough people to keep Mariawald running, and the brothers were relocated and moved elsewhere. But it would not remain abandoned. In fact, it may even be more bustling, more popular now than it was in 2018 before the brothers left. And that's all thanks to the Association of the Convent of Trappist Order Mariawald, which is a capitalistic venture, a group of not necessarily church members, but rather civilian, for lack of a better word, employees who run and operate the Abbey. They do the gift shop. They do their wonderful restaurant. Oh my gosh, the spargle soup is so delicious there. Mariawald is famous for how good their soup is. They do the custodial, they clean the grounds, they do the upkeep, and they keep it as a center for still for religious worship and pilgrims and everything like that, but also for tourism. This association keeps Mariawald running. And one of the more interesting things that they decided that they wanted to do was that they wanted to formally commercialize their brewing operations. I think they saw how popular the explosion of Trappist beer has come over the past 20 years or so. Rather unknown or kind of like cult following into full on mainstream, people lining up down the doors to get their hands on some Trappist beer. I hear all the time people saying, I want to come to Europe and get me some of that monk beer. They ended up hiring Braumeister Anton Schmidt of the nearby Gesmunder Brewery to design the recipe for the first officially licensed beer of Mariawald Abbey, Nemus Maria, taken directly from the inspiration of their own history. Now, Nemus Maria is an extremely interesting beer style, very unlike anything I've ever had from any other Trappist brewery, and maybe even so from your more secular brewing operations. Somehow, it perfectly captures that lost period of brewing I mentioned earlier. It is marketed as a triple. It says it's a triple, which would be expected. That's kind of like the standard offering from most Trappist breweries, but this is not like any other Trappist triple. It is noticeably darker, maltier, and fuller in body than what you would expect to find in a Belgian triple. While researching this beer, I came across a website of the nearby monastery called Kloster Steinfeld, which also has a brand of beer. Kloster Steinfeld is actually commissioning the reconstruction of Mariawald's brewery and will operate it under the same strict observance of their own, which produces its own lovely Kellerbier and Zwickelbier. The best part, though, is that Kloster Steinfeld's website also has the complete backstory behind the Nemus Maria triple. Interestingly says that it is a triple Bock beer. And there's a couple different things. One, if it is a Bock, that would explain its darker color. That would explain a lot of its flavor because it is, we'll get there. But it's just darker than a triple. It's maltier than a triple, fuller in body than a triple, and its taste is not quite triple. But this is definitely no triple Bock either. If you tasted this beer, you would find it enjoyable for sure, but you would not be able to recognize it as either a triple or a Bock. It certainly has characters of each though. The full in-your-face flavor, dry and crisp finish of the triple, to include a distinct spicy and herbal note, despite it being brewed in accordance to the Reinheitsgebot, and the big malty and well-rounded and really refined body of a Bock. I wonder if there was some type of either error in what they were trying to write, or maybe a translation error from Google as I translated the website. But what I actually think it is, after drinking it, it seems to be almost like a hybrid between the triple and a German Bock, which would kind of embody that whole history I was talking about earlier, where they came from Belgium and France and then they were repopulated in Germany. If that's right, this is the history of Mariawald in liquid form. I didn't know what I wanted out of a Trappist brewery in Germany, but this is it. Once the Gesmunder Brewery was commissioned to brew the test batches of this beer, they were unfortunately struck by those horrific floods that just decimated North Germany in 2021. Fortunately, the test batch had been already brewed and placed into storage to mature, but due to the absolute flooding and devastation that happened in this region, it would take workers 6 months for the brewery to be dug out of the mud and returned to an operational status. And it was only then, after 6 months, that they dug it out, they were able to give it its first taste. And it was just so well put together, so refined, so perfect, that was the way that they decided they were going to carry it on forever. And now, with the monastery's brewery being reconstructed and put back together inside the actual abbey, brewing operations for this beer are going to move over full-time to the abbey. However, with all that said, I do feel like I'd be a little remiss if I did not talk about where exactly Mariawald's triple falls into the overall zeitgeist of Trappist beer. On the surface, you would want to consider Mariawald a Trappist beer. because it comes from a Trappist monastery now, a Trappist Abbey. It has a long lineage and history steeped in Trappist dealings and doings. I mean, they even have their own Trappist glass with the gold rim and everything. Yes, I know it is a beer stein, and not the beautifully intricate glass goblets like the others, but they're German, for Christ's sakes. Come on. But it is not. And that's because to carry the official seal of the Trappist Brewery, to be an official Trappist product, it not only must be brewed within the walls, which it currently is, but it must also be either done by or overseen by the Trappist Brotherhood. There has to be actual Trappist brothers there that are playing some type of role, even if only supervisory, for it to be an official Trappist licensed product. And because the brothers were relocated in 2018, Mariawald is unable to provide that function, provide that supervision, and unfortunately cannot carry the official Trappist mark. Where they actually end up falling is into what I'm calling affectionately the pseudo-Trappist market, which includes, good company like Mons de Cats in France, even the Akel Brewery up in Belgium, which until very, very recently was a full-fledged Trappist brewery with the mark and everything. Because their brotherhood also left, they are no longer considered Trappist officially on their products. But even St. Bernardus, which is its own crazy, convoluted history that we'll talk about some other day. But they're in good history. They're in the Trappist realm. They're just not official. Regardless, I cannot love this brewery or this beer enough. It is just so unique, so special, so different than anything else you would expect. And it is worthy in almost every way to be held up against the famed Trappist beers, in its own right. It is a work of art, truly. And I just can't get over how perfectly it captures the spirit, the essence, and the history of Mariawald. I do hope that the operations get up full and running and they do make a name for themselves. And maybe, who knows, maybe one day some brothers might be able to make their way back and it will gain its official mark. But until then, it kind of remains this beautiful little hidden secret and, until I release this video and everything. But anyways, I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And man, if you get the opportunity, seek this out. It's fantastic. So thank you for watching, everybody. Like, comment, subscribe. Remember, there is a story, maybe a couple, in every bottle, and that life is beautiful. Cheers.